Please join me in welcoming Cliff.
Morning, everybody. Cliff Pyron, Chief Commercial Officer for the Authority. Just a quick background on myself. I'm 38 years in transportation and logistics. I really have an international shipping and logistics background. Spent a good bit of my professional career. I lived in Hong Kong during the 90s with shipping companies. Been at the port for about 10 years now at the GPA as their Chief Commercial Officer, responsible for all of our commercial activity, commercial strategy, economic development, etc. I have a presentation here today just to really explain what's going on at the Georgia port. So there's going to be a bunch of different parts to it, but I'm going to try to do it in an interesting way. And I apologize to my friend Alan here because he's actually seen this. He actually saw it last week. So he may be bored to death. He may just put his head down on his desk and close his eyes for the next 30 to 45 minutes. But for those of you who may not know a lot about the Georgia Ports Authority, we are an instrumentality of the state of Georgia. We are owned by the state of Georgia, but we are separate from a budgeting standpoint. We are a state authority, not a state agency. So we're expected to act and operate like a private enterprise for profit. And all those profits get plowed back into the 5 deep water terminals that we operate in the state of Georgia. So really when people ask, hey, what do you do at the Port Authority? We are an enabler of trade and commerce in pure and simple terms, and we really strive to get embedded in the supply chains of our clients. So again, we're part of that greater economic engine for the state of Georgia. So that's what I'm going to take you through here today, where we've been, where we're going. And you're going to have to bear with me today because I'm going to do it in the way I'm going to tell a little bit of a story. So not quite a dry PowerPoint presentation, kind of like the one I'm going to give to the Caterpillar leadership tomorrow who are flying in from Peoria tonight. But I'm kind of trying to do this in a way that really weaves some analogies with sports. So question here to the group. Who is the best athlete of our time? And that athlete is not even a person. Any guesses? Secretariat. Secretariat in 1973, 46 years ago, won the Triple Crown. It was amazing. There's only been 13 horses in 145 years that have won the Triple Crown. And what's interesting about Secretariat, that Secretariat's records in the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness and the Belmont still stand here today. 46 years later, those 3 records have never been broken. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Secretariat and how that relates to the Georgia port. So you'll kind of get it as we're going along. But anyway, I'm going to draw comparisons to the GPA logistics industry and how we can set goals for something bigger. But first, let's watch this.
On the day of the Derby, the horse leaves the gate.
And they're off.
He's dead last.
On the inside, that's Angle Light for the lead. On the outside, Shecky Green.
He starts circling the field slowly around the first turn.
On the outside, Navajo, followed by Secretariat. Warbuck. Finally, Twice a Prince.
Down the back stretch and around the far turn, he's moved up and he's flying on the outside. You can see those white and blue silks. And I'm thinking, man, he's back. He literally went faster and faster throughout the Kentucky Derby.
Secretariat is 4th and moving up on the outside and is now 3rd.
He hooks Sham and they run head and head together, and we're all screaming up in the press box. The place was delirious.
Now and in the stretch, it's Secretariat. Sham holding in 2nd. It's Secretariat moving away. He has it by 2.5.
Then he pulls the fastest Kentucky Derby in history, 1:59.2. And the remarkable thing he did that day is he ran every quarter mile in that Derby faster than the preceding quarter.
Ran every quarter mile faster than the previous quarter mile. It was absolutely incredible. Started out the race in last. And how this kind of relates to the Georgia Ports Authority, I've been here for 10 years, but 15 years ago, even 11 years ago, the Georgia Ports Authority was the number 11 port in the United States. Our neighbor to the north, Charleston, was in the number 4 position. And so we were well behind the pack, kind of starting like Secretariat did last in the Belmont. So in the Preakness, also Secretariat, which is the next race, we're going to show that. Secretariat started out last in that race as well. So the GPA has done a lot of coming from behind in the last decade, the last 15 years as well. It took us 30 years to get to 1 million 20-foot equivalent units, or TEUs, at the Georgia Ports Authority. So it took us 30 years to get to 1 million. And just in those last years, in the last 15 years, we've surpassed 4 million TEUs. And very quickly, within a couple of years, we'll be at 5 million 20-foot equivalent units. So the growth has been incredible. We have been the fastest growing port in the United States for the last decade, and there's a lot of reasons for it, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about. Here today in the United States, in the port space, when you talk about port gateways, the importance of infrastructure, we're number 4, LA being number 1, and Long Beach being number 2. You know, they're right next to each other, only divided by a bridge. And the Port of New York, New Jersey being, it's one single port entity, being number 3. Savannah, with a population of only about 250,000, is 4. What's really interesting, though, you look at the ports of LA and Long Beach, you have 13 terminals in those 2 gigantic port complexes. In the Port of New York, New Jersey, you have 6 terminals. Well, the Port of Savannah is all 1 terminal. All that activity and that growth is being done on 1 single terminal. You can ask, how can it be done that way so efficiently, congestion-free, with velocity and fluidity that's unlike any other port in the U.S., which are very, very strained right now and having a lot of problems. But if you really talk about that growth, it's really been amazing. And just again, to look at our growth, 1 million TEUs back in 2001. By 2006, we were at 2 million. By 2013, 3 million, and by 2017, at over 4 million. And this year we'll probably be at about 4.5 million, 4.6 million, just depending upon the economy, depending upon China and what happens with tariffs. So again, 5 million, when is that going to happen? Soon, probably by our guess 2020 or 2021. Also, what a lot of people may not be aware of, we have the largest, not only do we have the largest single terminal facility in the United States at over 1,200 acres, it's 3 times the size of the next single biggest terminal in the U.S. The next single biggest one is a facility out in the Port of Los Angeles. It's called Pier 400. It's a Maersk facility, APMT facility. It's 400 acres. So our facility is 3 times the size of the next single biggest facility in the U.S. So that kind of scale and that kind of scalability in this day and age makes a big, big difference. But also about 85 miles south of us, we have the largest vehicle processing facility in the United States. We own an island down in the Brunswick area called Colonel's Island, and it is a 1,700 acre facility. Again, it's the largest vehicle processing terminal in the United States. So not only do we have the biggest marine container terminal, but we also have the biggest vehicle processing terminal in the United States. And you can see how that auto growth also has grown at the same time. From 97 at 100,000, and by 2018, over 600,000. So now today, only the Port of Baltimore is the only port that actually moves more vehicles in and out of the United States than we do in Georgia. So it's been a great story. So how did we get there? You know, who else can claim in the United States to have 2 facilities like that that are just 85 miles apart? So again, that kind of scale and this kind of scalability is just really, really meaningful. And it's like with Amazon, who's now been coming to the port for 4 or 5 years now. They are our fastest growth client, as they are for a lot of port gateways. But the reason why Amazon came to, they only use 3 ports, and they've just included a 4th port in their portfolio, but they have told us clearly it's because your scale. Your scale is unique, and it allows them the kind of fluidity that they need to move high volumes of cargo through very, very efficiently, and then eventually get that cargo out into 100+ fulfillment centers, FCs, all over the U.S. It takes a lot of partners. It takes a lot of teamwork. We don't do it alone. The Georgia Ports Authority just had a conference last week. We call it our Georgia Foreign Trade Conference down at Sea Island, Georgia. A lot of partners, from ocean carriers to railroads to suppliers, providers, etc., to terminal companies, to consultant partners, to real estate developers, to economic development groups. All these folks, banks, all involved in that chain, in that teamwork chain with us. It takes a community. You look at a lot of the major brands, these were just the brands that were just at our conference, so it's not even all inclusive, certainly, of our portfolio business coming through the Georgia ports here today, but these were the customers that also attended our event just last week. So you can see it's just a who's who of clients. Again, the steamship lines who we work with all over the world, visiting them in Asia, visiting them in Europe, the Middle East, wherever their headquarters are, they were well represented at the event too. So again, it takes that teamwork to really pull things together, to really build an enterprise that's going to be sustainable. Also, you see what's happening in the auto industry here in the Southeast, and it's been pretty remarkable, but these are the largest brands that are now moving through our Brunswick facility as well. A lot of these people are moving their parts through our container facility. So you see that integration of the parts coming in to all these manufacturing facilities, and then you see the export vehicles moving out that are being exported all over the world. So it's a great story. We continue to build upon it. All these brands were also at our conference event. So again, teamwork. It takes teamwork to build a winner and to build a model that's going to last. So how will we at the Georgia Ports Authority win the Triple Crown? It's by continuous improvement. And when I was at a shipping line called NYK, I was their vice president of North America sales before coming to the Port Authority. He called it Kaizen, and it's that focus on continuous improvement. And that's what we've been focused on at the Georgia Ports Authority, never resting on our laurels. I mean, I really believe in the old adage, stay humble, stay hungry, don't ever, because if you sit back for a moment, if you pat yourself on the back for more than about 30 seconds, someone else is going to catch you, and someone's going to pass you by, and we cannot allow that to happen. This is what you're going to see the Georgia Ports Authority spend for the next decade. We're going to spend about $3 billion over the next 10 years. So again, we are reinvesting all the profits that we make back into our terminal facilities, mostly going into the container facility, because it does represent about 89–90% of the revenue of the Georgia Ports Authority. So it is really our 800-pound gorilla. So again, that $3 billion, that's big dollars, and that doesn't even include our harbor deepening project. It does not include things that are being done on the roads to help the connectivity with the port. That is just things that we're trying to do with inside our fences or with our inland ports that I'm going to talk about a little bit later also. We're in a really great financial position. The Georgia Ports Authority does not have any debt. So we don't receive any subsidies from the state of Georgia, unlike other ports, like just a couple off the top of my head. The Port of Virginia got a $3 million gift from the Commonwealth. The ports in Philadelphia also got a $300 million gift from the state of Pennsylvania about 2 years ago to reinvest. We don't receive anything from the state of Georgia, so everything we do is through our own revenues. I'm going to show you what we're going to do over the next 10 years in terms of expansion. We're going to be adding about 100,000 feet of rail on that facility. And we have about 80, if you took all the concrete ties that we're buying, if you put them end to end, it'd be about 87 miles of railroad ties that we're going to have on that facility. So that expansion is going to be tremendous. So we have to build, we have to continue to improve and enhance that infrastructure. And I'll tell you why a little bit later, but it all has to do with the bigger and bigger ships that are coming to the U.S. East Coast. Remember when I started out in the industry in 1981, ships were an average of 2,200 TEU ships. And when I was with a company called U.S. Lines, they invented at that time the largest ships in the world. They were called the Econ ships. They were built in 1984. They were 4,400 TEU ships, and that was the maximum that could go through the Panama Canal at that time. And we just thought those were absolute behemoths. We thought, boy, there's no way that vessels could ever get bigger than Panamax size. Well, lo and behold, here we are now in 2019. There are ships on the water at 23,000 20-foot equivalent units. So even the Panama Canal, even with their expansion that was completed in June of 2016, is already constrained because the biggest vessels that they can handle through the canal are 14,000s. And yet there's 18s, 20s, 22,000s on the water here today that can't go through the Panama Canal. Now, anything that would ever come to the U.S. East Coast would have to come through the Suez Canal, or if it was coming from Asia, it would just be able to go to the West Coast. I'll show you now some of the improvements that we're doing down at our Colonel's Island facility, which is that automotive vehicle roll-on, roll-off facility. Having room to continue to grow like this is a big, big deal. You see everything in green there is permitted property that we have the ability to develop on behalf of the OEMs. So we have all those OEM brands that I had showed you in the earlier slide. We met just last week with another automotive account from Detroit that's looking very, very seriously at our Colonel's Island facility. And the reason why, they need the space. They need the space. And there are port constraints on all the West Coast ports, the East Coast ports, and the Gulf ports that are handling the automotive. So thankfully, we have facilities that are just dedicated to the containers, facilities that are just dedicated for the vehicles, and there's no conflict between those two different streams of business. So 8.8 million TEUs, 1.5 autos is the plan for us by 2028. So how we're going to get there in the next 9 or 10 years, well, that's going to be our challenge, and that's what we're going to take you through. Next, we're going to take a look at the Preakness, and this was the second leg of the Triple Crown back in 1973. And it was interesting that at the time, prior to Kentucky Derby, there was another horse by the name of Sham, whose name is kind of lost to history. But Sham actually had the third fastest Kentucky Derby time of all time. Secretariat being one. Sham came in second in that particular Kentucky Derby, but Sham, if he raced in any other year, probably would have won the Triple Crown. So again, Sham was expected to win this. Just watch and see what happens in the Preakness.
Secretariat bobs his head. We're still looking, and they're off for the early lead. That's Deadly Dream on the outside, Ecolitage. Then it's also Torsion on the outside. As they pass the stands, Secretariat is last.
At the first turn, he was last, circled the field, and by the time they came out of the turn, he was in front of the whole field.
Sham under an easy hold right now, but here comes Secretariat. He's moving fast, and he's going to the outside. He's going for the lead, and it's right now he's looking for it. Ronnie Turcotte sends him alongside Ecolitage. Here we have it. A Coley-Taj is the leader, but Secretariat is right alongside.
I ain't never seen him jump and take off that fast. He just make one leap and said, take me to the outside. He said, let's ride.
Here comes Sham second on the outside now. Now it's Secretariat the leader by a length and a half. With Sham moving into second. They're on the turn. Here's the race, folks. Secretariat trying to hold it, and Sham is driving to get him.
He expected to win. He had taken his career entirely into his own hands.
It is Secretariat. He's coming to the wire. He wins it by 2.5, almost 3.
Secretariat won the first 2 races in record time. It wasn't just that he won them. He won them faster than any other horse had ever run them.
And again, those records have never been broken. 45 years later, we'll see what happens here this year. But 45 years later, his records have never been broken. As Penny Chenery said, he had taken his career entirely into his own hands, or to his own hooves. But we kind of relate that to what we're doing at the Georgia Ports Authority, is taking matters into our own hands. And we have had to look beyond what we do just within our fences and just within our boundaries to look well beyond the reaches of our port. And again, as I said at the outset, really embedding ourselves in the supply chains of our customers, just being the partner of choice and being that almost a supply chain consultant with our clients, and we do it all the time. But taking things into our own hands, controlling all aspects of our service. I look at a Bill Gates quote that after the Super Bowl, that Bill Belichick just likes to say, if everyone does their own job, we will all win. And more aptly put, the late, great Johnny Wooden, who I just loved, he was the coach of UCLA during the dynasty that UCLA had. He just preached that preparation above and beyond all else was really the key. The key in basketball, the key in life was just all about that preparation. And he believed that if you were prepared, that you were going to come out on top more often than not. And in his case, he sure was, with 11 national championships at UCLA during his time. So again, what the GPA focuses on is what is happening beyond the gates, inserting ourselves into the supply chain. So we've heard about the obstacles for truckers and all these kind of things, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our inland ports and why we're doing that, constantly trying to find ways to be there for our customer. We have to think about our customers in a new way. And when I talk about why we're doing things with inland ports and why we're doing things with our long-haul rail strategy, we don't have a choice. We have to be ahead of this curve. I was at an ATA conference, American Trucker Association conference a while back. The average age of the average trucker in the United States is now 56 years old. 7% of the driver population in the United States is 65 or older. So truck capacity just continues to go down. International trade and commerce continues to go up. So that delta gets bigger and bigger every year. And trucking, that last mile piece is just so critical. You may not always think about it in a classroom setting, but if you ask any major retailer, any major importer, what is your choke point? What is your biggest bottleneck? In fact, we were with Nike just last week with their director of international logistics and procurement. And I just asked him again, what's the single biggest challenge at Nike? He says, last mile. Last mile is not getting it out of the factories in China or Vietnam, where most of their product is coming from, as well as from all over the world. Not getting it through the ports in Asia, although there can be congestion issues there, or congestion issues at certain ports in the U.S., not in ours, but just getting it the last mile because of trucker capacity, because of chassis, things that seem kind of mundane but are just such a critical link to the supply chain. I'm going to talk about why we're having to embed ourselves in all those kind of things. I guess everyone knows who this company is. This is the original logo of Amazon. Invented, Jeff Bezos, everyone knows the story. It was all about books. They were trying to compete with Borders, and Borders eventually went Chapter 11 and out of business. But that's what Amazon was originally was. And you look at what Amazon has become and what they've turned into, it's just absolutely unbelievable. You know, 3-4 years ago when you know, there seems to be like an Amazon package at my doorstep like every single day. I don't know about y'all, but for years you're seeing the UPS trucks and the FedEx trucks just coming out through neighborhoods every day, just taking out boxes. Now, you know, what do you see? You see Amazon with their own trucks. In fact, they have put in an order to the Daimler plant in South Carolina that builds the Sprinter vans for 25,000 more vehicles over the next 5 years are going to be produced in Ladson, South Carolina for Amazon. So they're taking their career, they're taking their lives and their business and enterprise into their own hands. They're doing the same thing with Atlas Air, who's the airline that basically Amazon just basic, I won't say controls, but pretty much has a great partnership with, and they're even looking at chartering ships. So you see what Amazon is just taking control of their destiny. So again, Amazon has never said, it's not my job. So that's what we at the Georgia Ports Authority, we have to take things beyond our gateways, and we got to make sure that our customers who are ultimately putting their business into DCs in Memphis or Columbus, Ohio, or to Chicago, that we're working with them to make sure that the cargo gets delivered there in a timely manner. It's not just about flowing it through our port, but making sure that all those handoffs, all those links in the chain are interconnected, that they're going to have the service levels there. Another group that we can't do without, obviously, is the International Longshoremen's Association, the ILA, who has the waterfront jurisdiction for the U.S. East Coast and Gulf Coast. You have the International Longshoremen's and Warehousemen's Union, the ILW, it's a different union, doing pretty much the same activities, has the waterfront jurisdiction for the West Coast of the United States. Well, they just signed a 6-year extension with UXMX, and that's the alliance of the carriers and the terminal operators who just represent the carrier interests in negotiating the contract. So we as a port authority do not contract with labor, although they are on our terminals every day by the thousands just working the vessels. Everything above and beyond that is done by Georgia Ports Authority employees, except the unions also have the responsibility for the gates and the maintenance and the repair on containers and chassis and those kind of things. So a lot of ILA are on our terminal, but we also have about 1,300 Georgia Ports Authority employees. So it's been just a huge booming growth thing. But USMX and the ILA have worked together to forge together a 6-year agreement. So there's going to be peace in our time, as Neville Chamberlain once said, but peace in our time with the union, which is a really great thing. And the ILA is a great partner for the Georgia Ports Authority. But this is important when retailers, importers, and manufacturers are looking at making investment decisions on the U.S. East and Gulf Coast. They want to know what the labor environment's like, and is it friendly? Is it going to be fluid? Do they have anything that they have to fear for the next few years? And they don't, which is a great thing. And these are all the folks that are involved in that negotiation process. All these people were just represented at our conference just last week. So when I continue to talk about teamwork and community and having these people there, from our beneficial cargo owners, our BCOs as we call them, be it Home Depot, Walmart, Lowe's, Amazon, having those BCOs there, having the ocean carriers there, having the unions with us, having our economic development partners and banks and everyone that's involved in the process. We bring them down annually to our conference, and we spend time together because we know it does take a village. It does take community to keep an enterprise going, growing, and to keep it sustainable. You know, Superpeak. Okay, what does that have to do with anything? Well, if anyone was seeing what was going on with tariffs in China and everything, we experienced a boom in the fourth quarter of 2018 like you have not seen, we had never seen. It was like a tsunami wave of cargo that was coming in the fourth quarter. A lot of it was because of the concern that everyone had with China tariffs. So they were just absolutely crushing the ports on the West Coast, the East Coast, the Gulf Coast with cargo. And if you were reading any of the online journals or the paper journals just talking about all the congestion problems in major ports, it was because of that effect of freight. So it really was a super freight, something that's really unusual that we don't have going up to Christmas time. We do have a kind of a pre-Chinese New Year peak that we get a spike for a few weeks because all the factories close in China for 2 weeks, as probably most everyone knows. So there's usually a softening of cargo after that Chinese New Year. But every few years, something happens to stress the system. And this year was a big test of that. And a lot of the ports and the supply chains just failed because they have not invested in infrastructure the way that they need to. A lot of talk about infrastructure. You look at all the talk shows, all the news shows. The cable news. You seem to get a lot more opinion than you're actually getting facts. But a lot of opinions. But there's always a lot of talk about infrastructure. But you don't see people putting their money where their mouth is in terms of infrastructure. You don't see it with the ports, you don't see it with the railroads, the highways, and I dare say that Georgia has done a great collective job between the state, all the agencies like DOT, authorities like the Georgia Ports Authority, just working together just to make sure that we have an infrastructure that's in place that's going to be sustainable for at least another half century. Well ahead of the curve of Southern California, the PNW, the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic. So we're in great shape. So why? Again, because we're taking these matters into our own hands. Things like chassis. Again, maybe boring the crowd, but again, all these pieces have to be able to come together effectively. The trucking community, chassis are a big deal. This is one of the biggest problems that the West Coast, places like Chicago, Memphis are experiencing. Huge delays, tremendous congestion. There's just not enough chassis in the right quantities in the right place at the right time. So there may be enough collectively as a whole, but they're just, again, not enough in the right quantities in the right place at the right time to meet the demand, especially as the vessel sizes get bigger. It puts a strain on the supply chain, which few are able to react to. So again, these are kind of things that we read every day. These things are in journals every single day. We've got Brian Green from Halstead here. He's experiencing these issues in Southern California, as are a lot of our partners and friends. And I'm here to tell you, it's probably not going to get better. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better. In fact, I know it is. We're in a great place where, thankfully, we're not affected the way that other people are because we've been investing. We spent over $2 billion for the last 10 years. And this chassis thing is just an example, so I'm just going to take a second to talk about it. About 2 years ago, we have not been happy with the amount of chassis that were available in the Savannah market. We had been growing like this at a clip of about 8% for the last 3 years in a row, 10.5, 8.5, and 7.5 over the last year. So those 3 years, the growth has been incredible. The chassis pool had only grown by about 2,000 chassis. So again, there were not enough. And then when these big ships are coming in with big exchanges, they might have 5,000 or 6,000 containers on that one vessel that are coming off in Savannah. Maybe they're 14,000 TEU vessels, but they have cargo that's going to other ports too. But they may have 5,000 or 6,000 that are coming off in one chunk at our port. And if you don't have enough chassis, and if you don't have enough truck capacity, that's obviously going to bring things to a screeching halt, which then affects the entire the supply chain. So we began talking with this group who added about 8,000 chassis to our pool over the last 2 years, and a lot of it we're having to foot the bill on. So our chassis model is going to have to change, and we have to stay ahead of that curve to be able to react to what's going on to trade and commerce. How else are we taking things into our own hands at the Georgia Ports Authority? We're going to talk about some of our progress here at our Garden City Terminal, which you'll see. And this is not an animation, this is all live. So we're going to spend we're spending $200 million on that rail facility, tying together with the only port on the U.S. East Coast that has both Class 1 railroads, meaning Norfolk Southern and CSX, which are the two Class 1 railroads east of the Mississippi. We're the only port on the U.S. East Coast that has both of the Class 1s on terminal. So for us, that's a big, big deal because intermodal is really going to be the future, and it is our fastest growth area. Today, intermodal represents about 22% of everything that we're moving in and out of our port, and it's only going to grow because it has to. It's the most cost efficient, it's the greenest way to move cargo, and it's going to be the most efficient way to move cargo into the future because drayage, trucking is going to continue to be a challenge throughout the United States. This is our network, Georgia. We opened our first inland port here just this past August in a little town called Chatsworth, Georgia. It's in northwest Georgia, around that Dalton area. It's about 25 miles south of Chattanooga. So again, these pictures were taken from a phone 2 Fridays ago. So we're doing about 200 or 300 boxes a week to and from Chatsworth now. It's really an economic development opportunity. We're talking to several major importers, to a couple of private equity companies about developing projects up there in building DCs. So we see this as being a real incubator for economic development and just getting closer to where the customers are. So this inland port is going to be able to service at northwest Georgia, northeast Alabama, eastern or central and eastern Tennessee, and a little bit of southern Kentucky too, with some of the clients that we've been talking about in that area. So that is, oops, Andy, what did I do? I was trying to use the pointer. Okay. Okay, this is the pointer. I'm sorry. Okay, so the Northwest port is there in Chatsworth. It's opened in August. We just announced 3-4 Mondays ago another inland port in northeast Georgia. So we're buying a 72-acre piece of property with probably maybe adding another 25 or 30 acres on top of that. That's going to take a couple of years, 2.5 years to develop that piece. So that's going to be in process. That's in the Gainesville area in Hall County. And then a third later on down the road in west central Georgia. And that's going to probably be tied in concert with our good friends at Kia Motors that are down there in the West Point and the LaGrange area. So again, trying to build alternatives to just because of this trucking challenge. And again, here today with electronic log devices, ELDs, and hours of service issues, anything really more than 225 miles now becomes a real challenge and a real push for the trucking community because truckers just want to get home at night. And they can't do it now with hours of service beyond kind of that range. So, and they're just leaving the industry in droves. You know, when I was been in Atlanta here at the poultry convention here this week, they got a convention here in town, about 30,000 people from all over the world for a poultry convention. A lot of them are, logistics people. But I'm riding with the Uber guys, from hotel to dinners and all this, and I always ask, how are you doing? You making any money doing this, or what'd you do before? You just can't believe how a high percentage of these people were truck drivers. And they said the fact that they can make almost as much as they were making as a trucker with a lot less hassle, with a lot less risk, a lot less responsibility, and can pick and choose their own hours. So if a trucker can make as much money being a barista at Starbucks or can make almost as much being an Uber driver, it's going to be hard to attract truckers. You may have seen that Walmart put out a thing about a week ago, I guess it was, the Monday before last, that they're now going to be hiring, they're looking to hire about 900 more company-owned truck drivers and guaranteeing $80,000 base pay. Because they recognize a critical need that they have to move ahead quickly. They have to leap forward and do something to really battle this trucking issue. Now, with the GPA, the MidAmerica Ark, that program is that set $200 million intermodal facility that we're building on our terminal that's going to allow both CSX and Norfolk Southern to build full 10,000-foot trains on our facility. So for the railroads, it's all about density. And you can build really efficient trains if you can allow them to build 2-mile trains. So we'll have the ability to do that once our facility is complete. So it's going to allow us to be able to reach into Memphis a lot more effectively than we do today, even though it is our #2 intermodal destination after Atlanta. So Atlanta's our #1 today, Memphis is our #2, but it's going to allow us to get into St. Louis, Columbus, Louisville, even back to Chicago. Even here today, we have a major Korean electronics company that today has switched all their Chicago cargo. They have a DC outside the suburbs of Chicago that they used to heretofore be moving everything over the West Coast, over Southern California, into this area, and because of all the congestion issues that they were combating in Southern California, they decided to reroute that cargo through the Panama Canal, coming to Savannah, and then moving up to Chicago. Well, they found that over a year's time, even though our transit time was longer, because you have to obviously go through the Panama Canal and come through, so it takes several days longer depending upon the services. It can be anywhere from 4 to 7 days longer versus going into Southern California. But because of the reliability and predictability, in Savannah, there's a rail service that provides 2-day service, 3rd-day availability, 5 days a week to the Chicago market. So again, we see this as our growth option, our biggest avenue for growth, and those are services that our major retailers, importers, and exporters are really crying for, and they're looking for this kind of help. Okay, we're going to go to Belmont now. The Belmont is the longest of all the Triple Crown races. It's 1.25 miles. And what had happened after the first 2 races, that the owners of all the horses were just so defeated that you just count the number of horses that ran in the Belmont here in 1973. So we're going to take a look at this now.
We come up to the day of the Belmont, sun's just coming up. She rattled the bucket on the wall, and Secretary heard that, and he went up in the air, and he started walking around. He was pawing at the sky, and he comes down, and he's dancing. He's on like a dressage horse on springs, and his nostrils are flared, and his eyes are big and round, and he's snorting. He literally pranced into his stall, and I thought to myself, oh my God, what are we going to see out there today?
Everybody's in line, and they're off. Looks like the early lead goes to My Gallon. Yes, My Gallon going for the lead with twice the press on the outside. Secretary away very well, has good position on the rail.
Only 5 horses ran in the Belmont.
Moving for the first turn, it is Secretariat. Sham on the outside is also moving along strongly. And now it's Sham. Sham and Secretariat are right together into the first turn.
I looked at the teletimer and saw that the horse had gone 3/4 of a mile in 1:09 and 2, which is the fastest 3/4 of a mile ever run in the Belmont Stakes. And he's leaving Sham at this point. And I'm thinking, he has gone insane. And I'm cursing under my breath. You moron. What are you doing? You're going to kill the horse. You're going to lose the Triple Crown. Don't you know how fast you're going?
He's moving into the turn. Secretariat holding on to a large lead. Sham is second, and then it's a long way back to My Gallon and twice the print. They're moving on the turn now. Over the turn is Secretariat. It looks like he's opening. The lead is increasing. They get 3.5. He's moving into the turn. Secretariat holding on to a large lead.
And he still has 1/4 mile to go. And I'm thinking to myself, he's going to totally collapse in this race. He can't keep this up. And I'm asking other guys that are on the track, what are you thinking? And everybody to a man is thinking, he's going to him.
He is moving like a tremendous machine that is impossible to catch. He's into the stretch. Secretariat leads his field by 18 lengths.
Right, that's good.
And now Price of Prince
Sorry about that.
second, and My Gallon is moved back to third. They're in the stretch. Secretariat has opened a 22-length lead. He is going to be the Triple Crown winner. Here comes Secretariat to the wire. An unbelievable, an amazing performance. He hits the finish. Secretariat has accomplished the unbelievable task of breaking the mile-and-a-half record by 2 3/5 seconds. That is a record that may stand forever.
This is more than the story of a single horse or the story of the great American horse as athlete. This is the story of one of the great American teams. Or the story of the great American horse as athlete. This is the story of one of the great American teams.
So again, Secretariat won by 31 lengths. And it's a record here today, again, 45 years later, has never been broken. It's the fastest Belmont ever. Sham, who finished second in the first 2 races, came in dead last. And it was interesting because Secretariat started last just to see what was happening in the field and then just went around the others and didn't look back. You know, being a fast follower is not a bad strategy as long as you have more gas in the tank. You know, Sham himself broke a lot of records. His trainer, Sham's trainer, thought that Secretariat was just a sprinter, and that was the reputation that Secretariat had leading up to the Triple Crown. In fact, the trainer had said at the before the race that he guaranteed that Sham was going to win. Kind of a cocky thing for a trainer to say, but the trainer guaranteed that Sham was going to win the Belmont. So even when the competition was far behind, Secretariat kept pushing himself all throughout that race. He could have slowed down and still easily have won. So a lot of this, I equate to the GPA. It's not about the race itself, it's how you prepare for the race. The Secretariat's owner said that we will prepare for this race differently. The team that managed Secretariat knew their product. They knew what their product was, and they prepared accordingly. Others thought it would break the horse, but they changed their strategy on how to run the horse, and they pushed Secretariat really hard between the Preakness and the Belmont, which is kind of like you don't really see that a lot because you want to give the horse more rest between the 2 races. Sham was rested between the 2 races, between the Preakness and the Belmont, and Secretariat was worked hard. So again, they changed their strategy. You have to adapt. You have to adapt. You constantly have to be able to do that. The Georgia Ports Authority has had, a really strong 15, 20 years. There's no doubt. When we began way back in the pack, and even 30 years ago when I was a young guy in my career and coming down to Savannah in the mid-'80s, I used to travel down there with Kmart and with Sears, and I'm like, oh boy, what a dump this place is. This is awful. And then actually never knowing that I was going to become a part of this. And then with just seeing what has evolved here, especially over the last 15, 20 years and the 10 years that I've been fortunate enough to be honored to be working with the Port Authority. But this is where we're going. When you invest capital, the business is going to come because we know that our stakeholders are going to need that. Secretary, the strategy that they had broke the conventional wisdom, that you start out slow. We talked about Sham coming in last place in this. He tried to keep up with Secretariat in the early part of the race and couldn't, and it just broke the horse and it just came in dead last. There were 2 strategies going into the race. They rested the team, and Secretariat had worked harder. The GPA is making the investments just at a rapid speed, and staying way ahead of our competitors. And it's enabling us to really sustain the kind of growth that we're seeing. And it's why retailers, importers, and manufacturers just are continuing to come to Georgia. Georgia's a great place to do business. For 6 years in a row, it's won the #1 state in the United States to do business with. And a lot of that is because the port is just integrally tied in with that whole thing, especially with where international trade and commerce is concerned. We're 2 races into the Triple Crown, but this is a much longer race, and it requires different training for the Georgia Ports Authority, just like Secretariat did between the Preakness and the Belmont. You know, everyone in this room wants to be far ahead, and I know that. And I tell you, the future is bright for the logistics professionals. I mean, you're going to have amazing opportunities, not only in the United States, but around the world, because it's going to be a real critical need for organizations moving forward. So the future for logistics is really, really bright. You know, so we keep moving like a tremendous machine, and so far, it has. Moving like a tremendous machine. The great American team. The great Georgia team. Again, this example here, these are companies that are all moving into Georgia in a major way. Mercedes now with their headquarters up there in Sandy Springs. Porsche right down by the airport. Kia Motors, their U.S. headquarters out in California, but their manufacturing plant, here in Georgia. They have the Hyundai plant in Montgomery, of course. Hapag-Lloyd, the German ocean carrier, although their U.S. headquarters are in New Jersey, about half of their staff in the United States is now domiciled in Atlanta, Georgia, because they were looking for the right mix of young professionals who could come in and could take their organization to another level. So they're here. Norfolk Southern, headquartered in the Norfolk area for years, announced their relocation of their corporate headquarters down to Atlanta. There's a reason that these things are happening. There's a reason that Georgia continues to attract the kind of companies and the kind of business that it does, which creates opportunities for everybody in this room, I dare say. And again, you look at what's happening in the Southeast as a whole. Just look at that automotive manufacturing that's taking place in the Southeast. The amount of high tech that's coming into the Southeast. The retail, the distribution centers, the pharma. I mean, big market spaces are coming down here in major ways. And there's a reason for it. We like to think of ourselves as a disruptor at the Georgia Ports Authority. We talk about Secretariat as a disruptor too. He was a disruptor because he just went too damn fast. He just defied all convention, particularly in the Belmont. So to us, being a disruptor is all about a means of customer service to our clients, and again, embedding ourselves into the supply chain of our customers. Some things that we're doing that you may or may not be aware of. You may hear about this on the news here. A lot is more probably down in the Savannah area, but the Savannah Harbor Expansion Project is going on. This is over $101 million in federal dollars here this year to continue this project. It's going to be about $1 billion spend to be able to deepen our channel. It's a 40-mile channel. It is critical to be able to do so because, again, the ships are getting bigger, and we have to have the waterways that are going to accommodate these vessels without tidal restrictions. 14,000 TEUs. These are kind of the workhorse size vessel in that Trans-Pacific Trade now. Not quite in the other trade lanes yet. They're smaller vessels, but in the Trans-Pacific Trade, this is becoming the real workhorse that's coming to the U.S. East Coast. Well, here's what it's evolving to. These things are just massive. So for us to be able to manage vessels of this size, which are probably going to be here within the next 8 to 10 years coming to the U.S. East Coast, we have to have a port and we have to have an infrastructure in place that's going to be able to efficiently handle vessels of this size. Here's what we're doing with a lot of land. We talk about being a disruptor as well. The Georgia Ports Authority owned over 500 acres within about 7 miles of the port. We've been holding on to the land for years. We had sold one parcel to Target, one parcel of it to IKEA. Well, we finally put the other acres up for sale about 2 years ago, and we were just astonished how quickly the balance of our property just got sucked up by developers and by retailers. It has just been, it absolutely just made our head spin. So you see these big footprints are being built here now. and it's been amazing. The Wayfarer Group, who's been a major disruptor in their space, is building a 1.2 million square foot facility, going to create 1,000 jobs in the Savannah area, so they're part of that growth. Americold, and I was telling Tim, we were just out with their senior leadership for dinner last night. I think you have a meeting with them. Some folks have some meeting with Americold here today. But Americold is the largest refrigerated distribution company in the United States. They have just bought a company down in the Savannah area. They're going to basically be doubling and maybe even tripling the capacity. So they looked at where they were going to put their investment dollars, and this is the biggest investment that Americold has made in the last 3 years in the United States. So again, there's a reason why people are coming here. In fact, we announced this Americold just last Thursday or last Tuesday at our Georgia Foreign Trade Conference. Big bursts, big ships. We have to, again, everything that we're doing infrastructure-wise to prepare our terminal for the future. By 2024, we are going to have 21 new cranes, a total of 37. So we're taking our older cranes that are in great shape, operating great, but they're too short. They're too short to handle the big ships now, so we're basically going to be taking them down and scrapping them. We've sold some to Puerto Rico, we've sold some to other carriers in the past, but now we're just going to be scrapping our older cranes, and we have to redo our berths, our docks, and buy and build newer and taller cranes to accommodate these big ships. Today, this is an aerial of part of the terminal. You can see the terminal. We have a 9-berth terminal, so there is no other, it's about 2 miles long. So there is no other terminal in the United States that can accommodate 9 ships at the same time. So it's a real advantage for us. But here today, we can only accommodate 2 of the 14,000 TEU ships here today. These berths cannot yet. So again, we are undergoing a massive renovation and enhancement of our docks. It's costing millions and millions of dollars. This one's going to be ready by April, May, so we'll be able to accommodate 3 of the big ships. And then by 2024, we'll be able to accommodate 6 of these 14,000 TEU ships. Again, no one else in the United States. There's no other terminal, there's no facility in North America or anywhere in the Western Hemisphere really that can do that. Again, globally, we are number 39. We're the 39th biggest port in the world, 4th biggest in the U.S. But again, this is what it's going to look like by 2024. So January of 2019, again, just talking about this huge crush of cargo having to do with China and tariffs and all that. We did 434,000 20-foot equivalent units in 1 month. Now, 20 years ago, that's what we were doing for the entire year. And so this year, just in 1 month, that we did that just in 1 month. So that was a 28% year-over-year increase. January was the biggest month that the Georgia Ports Authority has ever had in its history. We've never had a January like that. So not only was it our biggest January, it was the biggest of all time for the Georgia Ports Authority. One final ingredient to success that no one can actually see, and that's heart. Heart, community. Ultimately, you can have everything right, but you have to have heart. When Secretariat died in 1989, they did an autopsy, and they found that Secretariat's heart was 2.5 times the size of a normal horse. They thought it was just, you can Google it and you can look it up. It was absolutely amazing. They could not believe this. Again, 2.5, and I think that was part of the reason. I mean, it took great heart, and that's why this horse just has, it has Triple Crown records that have never been broken in 45 years. So again, I think, everyone outside of this room may underestimate your heart, but I know that our Georgia logistics industry has just really a great heart. And I've been so encouraged the last decade seeing the kind of teamwork that we have here in Georgia to put together an enterprise that is just really the envy of the world. So we made this comparison to Secretariat only because, the horse is just something that we'd like to aspire to be. We aspire to be a winner. We aspire to stay ahead of our competitors. We aspire to run fast. And you can't do that without a lot of teamwork and a lot of great community and a lot of heart. So with that, thanks for your time, and I'm here to answer any questions that anyone might have.
My name is Jose. Thank you for the presentation. I'm from Panama, and I was wondering, so let's say we convince the Panamanian people to do the expansion project. At the earliest, it could be done in 8 to 10 years. Don't you think that will be putting a lot of more stress in the ports authorities
No.
because of all the investments?
Yeah, there's no question. It'll put a lot more strain on ports, but it's probably something that the Panama Canal will ultimately they'll have to do. And I visit Panama every year. I know Tim spends a lot of time in Panama too. I'm down there with Jorge Quijano, who's the president of Panama Canal. He's going to be retiring at the end of this year. But they have been working with engineering consultants, and they are looking long and hard about a third set of locks on both the Pacific and the Atlantic side that can accommodate these vessels. It's just a matter of when, how long it'll take, and how much it's going to cost. It cost the country of Panama about $5.4 billion to build the last set, that could accommodate the 14,000s now, which they're doing. But they know in time that they're going to have to be able to do the 20s and the 22s eventually. But they have, they got concerns about the water too, with Lake Gatun and everything there too. A lot of it is dependent upon the availability of water as well. There have been times during drought that they've had to restrict the number of passings per day through the Panama Canal just because of water levels. So it's interesting, the second set of locks that were built down at the Panama Canal, they are recycling and reusing about 33% of the water, which is a great thing, because if you can just imagine how millions and millions of gallons of fresh water each day are just released into the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. With all the vessels going through. So if there's a way to reuse a lot of that water, it certainly behooves the Panama Canal Authority to be able to do that. Great question, thanks.
So with regards to, say, like Amazon, that they have a high demand for agility and speed, how has that changed the kind of port environment? More large volume, big ships.
They are just growing very, very fast. This is almost like a Walmart model 20 years ago. About 5 years ago, Amazon was basically buying everything on a landed basis, buying from vendors who were importing on their behalf. And much like Walmart did 20, 25 years ago, back in 30 years ago when I was living in Hong Kong, they have began changing terms of sale. They're buying more on a direct basis, from China all throughout Asia, all throughout the world. So their volume has just grown exponentially. So again, they have fluidity and velocity issues in every gateway that they do business in. And it is a massive headache for the Amazon organization. In fact, they are doing a complete redesign of their network now, because they don't think that the way that they're importing cargo now, they don't think it's going to be sustainable with their growth because of the ports. They will, in fact, they have Amazon folks are down in Georgia. They're coming to Savannah. It would be an exaggeration to say every month, but let's just say a lot. I'd say a half a dozen times a year the Amazon folks are coming down, or we're going out to Seattle to see them. They will tell us constantly, they said, thank goodness you guys are the only gateway in the U.S. that we don't have to worry about. And he said, if we could move everything through you guys, we would, but we can't. We have to have a gateway in Southern California. They have to have a gateway in the PNW. They also use the Port of Norfolk as a gateway as well.
And how do you change your operations to match that?
Well, again, through all this CapEx. I mean, it is heavy, heavy CapEx to expand our infrastructure all the time. Everything that we're doing at our docks, with our waterways, with our roadways, with our gates, all those kind of things, because we do have the ability to scale. where a lot of ports don't. And we have to be able to do it, or we're not going to be able to grow at the same rates that we've been able to grow over the last decade if we don't continue investing very, very aggressively back into the terminal, or frankly, we just won't be able to keep up. And that's what you're seeing happening in a lot of ports here today. Again, Southern California Gateway, other gateways are just so congested because they haven't invested in their ports and terminals. And it's different. It's a different kind of a business model because we own and operate the port in Georgia. Unlike the Port of LA and Long Beach, the Port of New York, New Jersey, they're landlord ports. So they're leasing these facilities out to terminal operating companies or to private equity groups like Brookfield Capital or Deutsche Bank and Macquarie, who are going in there. They're signing 30-year, 40-year concessions in a lot of these terminals. So they expect to they expect to provide their shareholders a return, at least 4.5 or 5% a year. So they're just trying to suck as much cash out of that as they can just to return to shareholders. So they're not reinvesting at the kind of rate that they should. Whereas we, again, being the owner and operator facility owned by the state of Georgia, we're compelled, we're mandated to reinvest 100% of those dollars back into our port. So that, thankfully, has been kind of the key difference that's allowed us to stay ahead of our competitors in a lot of ways.
All right, thank you.
Yes?
My name is Nishant Das. I'm a faculty in finance at the business school, also affiliated with the supply chain institute here, and also founded the blockchain initiative at Georgia Tech. So my question is, I hear a lot about CapEx on physical assets. What about soft assets like data analytics and especially blockchain?
Great questions. Well, I didn't touch on that. We're going under a technology upgrade now, principally with a company by the name of Navis, N-A-V-I-S. Probably wouldn't mean anything to anybody in this room, but they're based in Oakland, California. It's a $70 million technology upgrade, and we just upgraded it 10 years ago when I first came here. So again, there's a lot of focus on technology. I would say this facility is never going to be automated like you see a couple terminals around the world, be it in Hamburg or the new one in Long Beach, or the automated terminals in New York and Virginia. So there's certain terminals around the world that are highly automated. We don't have a lot of automation, but really a big emphasis on technology. And speaking of blockchain, we've entered a partnership with TradeLens, and that's a combination of IBM and Maersk for their blockchain, and we are exchanging information with this group now. So they're going to take a lot of that data now, and they're going to come back to us, and we're going to see what those findings are. So we don't really know what the benefits of blockchain. I mean, we know intuitively, of course, there's going to be benefits, and the industry is going to have to convert to blockchain. There's no question about it. The problem is, or the challenge is, it's not a problem, it's a challenge, but there's a lot of different blockchain platforms. So until all these platforms can find one communication, one common agreed upon vehicle exchange that they can all feed through, you're just going to have all these competing platforms, and it's just not going to be efficient unless they can find a way to bridge all that stuff together. But blockchain is going to be critical. Yes?
First and foremost, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to come down.
Oh, sure. Happy to do it.
The insights of port management. I just have a quick question. You mentioned several other kinds of companies like Deutsche Bank or Brookfield Asset Management. They're global, and they have also proprietary data sets. You mentioned several times the importance of CapEx investment. But how do you hedge? So, for example, like in many reports, sometimes in the Financial Times and so on and so forth, they say it's a global synchronized slowdown. You don't have as much births as before. How do you guys kind of like calibrate properly, like so that you don't overrun this?
That's a great question also. We at the Georgia Ports Authority, we have a 10-year forward plan that we update every other year. And we have economists, consultants that work with us on that on that 10-year forward plan. And it really tells us where and how we need to spend our money over the next 10 years. And what we did in 08 and 09 when the global crisis hit, I mean, it was unbelievable how it affected us, other port authorities, and everyone in the supply chains around the world. But the Georgia Ports Authority didn't take its foot off the gas at all. We just continued plowing ahead because we knew it was going to come back. Now the world is definitely slowing down. There's no question about it. You just look at all the data. You're not going to see global growth in trade and commerce the way it has been. So it's irrefutable that it is slowing down. But yet the volumes are tremendous. And if we don't, again, if we're forecasting, for example, that just conservatively that we're going to grow between 4.5% to 5% a year for the next decade. That's twice that of estimated GDP. So for us to be able to do that, what that says, even at 4.5% growth, that means in 7-8 years that we're basically going to double the volume that we're currently carrying here today, just because of the base of cargo. So we have to continue to invest aggressively, despite what those ups and downs in the economy are going to be, whereas you're going to see other terminals throughout the world who are more profit motivated, shareholder and return motivated, are going to be less inclined during the down times to make the necessary investments. And then once the economy comes back up, they're just not going to be ready. Yes?
You talked about a lot of improvement and expansion projects. Could you tell us a bit about how you decide which project to go ahead with and how you maybe estimate the impact of any project that you decide to do?
Well, as part of that 10-year plan, we really have to prioritize how that money is going to be spent, and we really have a good plan. But there are oftentimes, to your question, where we do have to make adjustments, because 2 years ago, as part of our 10-year plan, we didn't foresee the need to spend that $200 million on that intermodal project. We just knew that we were getting very tight and bunched up, congested with Norfolk Southern and CSX, but we didn't really foresee how fast the dynamics of business was changing in the U.S. and that we're going to have to reprioritize and put more emphasis on this intermodal facility and spend that money now. So we do have the ability to make those adjustments, which we do ongoingly. So even though we have that 10-year plan, it really gives us that blueprint. We do within that time frame make adjustments on where the priorities are. Yes?
Taking matters into their own hands, and with all the ongoing developments and innovations, how would you see the role of ports changing in the next 10, 20 years, for example?
The ports, if ports are going to win in the long term, I mean, they have to think beyond their own boundaries. They have to think beyond their own gates, as I was saying before. And it's, I mean, you really have to be embedded in the supply chain of your clients. And we spend a lot of time with the port authorities from all over the world who just want to come and visit us. So from Hamburg or Antwerp or Rotterdam or from Santos, Shanghai, Yokohama, they just want to come here. They want to, even ports in the U.S., we've hosted just about all of them. They want to figure out what we're doing, how we do it. And then what it really comes down to at the end of the day, where our model has been different than everyone else, even though the shipping lines are paying our bills, it's Maersk, it's APL, it's Evergreen, it's MSC, and those are the companies that are physically paying our bills. But at the end of the day, we know it's that beneficial cargo owner, it's the Halsteads of the world, it's the Home Depots, it's the Amazons, it's the Walmarts that are really going to determine where they're going to make their investment decisions based on the strategic importance of that gateway, their ability to reach their customers cost effectively. So our whole emphasis has been, well, like I have a commercial group that does nothing but focus on the ocean carriers, but then I have another larger group that focuses on those BCO interests, those 3PLs, a group that focuses on the economic development side. So it's putting all those pieces together with that kind of outreach to make sure that we're listening to our clients. What do you need? And they're telling us, we need help in Memphis. We need help in Chicago. So the first time that we heard this, we're just a port authority in Georgia. How are we supposed to help you with your supply chain issues in Memphis? But for us to be able to differentiate, for us to win the long-term game, we have to be able to do that. And we are doing that. In fact, the Georgia Ports Authority will probably be putting people, we'll probably have boots in the ground in Memphis once our intermodal once our intermodal project is done. We're going to be putting Georgia Ports Authority people in the Chicago area as well. So we are working really closely with the railroads on reporting visibility, all those kind of things. We're working with the chassis companies, and we are gonna just leap into the supply chain process way beyond our own gates.
And ports would typically become more supply chain orchestrators.
Absolutely. That's a perfect way to put it. That's what we're doing. I mean, we have,
I was going to say, I think we'll let you finish, but I think Cliff's got to rush to the airport.
Yeah, I got a 3 o'clock flight. Okay, well, if no more questions, thanks for having me here today, and okay, thanks.